All right, put the women and children in bed and go looking for dinner. Jon Rothstein here on Inside College Basketball Now. I want to remind you to subscribe to Inside College Basketball Now on both Apple and Spotify. We want to be your Bible for the college basketball season and beyond. We are the only college basketball podcast coming to you 52 weeks out of the calendar year. Also want you to like and subscribe to Inside College Basketball Now on YouTube. We want to get 250 likes on this particular show, so be sure to like and subscribe to the show. And a reminder, every Monday and Thursday, except for holiday weeks during the 25-26 college basketball season, we will be coming to you with a live episode each and every Monday and Thursday at 1 o'clock Eastern. And then, in addition to those two shows, we will be bringing you exclusive interviews throughout the week with the biggest and the best names in the sport. I've said it before, and I'll say it again. We need an army with us every single episode on Inside College Basketball Now. Be all you can be. And if you can't make the live show, join us on your commute home. Join us during your morning workout on Apple and Spotify. We are here for you to bring you the best and most in-depth coverage of college basketball. Again, 52 weeks out of the calendar year. And as always, let's start with three big things. And the first big thing I want to get to today relates to the team that is not just beating opponents, it is eviscerating opponents, and that is the Michigan Wolverines. Michigan has ripped through the first month of the 25-26 college basketball season like a chainsaw through butter under Dusty May. It is doing things right now at a historical rate. We saw what the Wolverines did in Las Vegas, dominating San Diego State, dominating Auburn, dominating Gonzaga by 40 points in the title game of the Players Era Festival. The dominance has not stopped. We saw a dominant performance last weekend against Rutgers, and we saw another dominant performance earlier this week against Villanova, where Michigan had a 30-point lead in the first half. This is historical types of dominance from Dusty May's team. And during the offseason, when you're always taking inventory of rosters and everything of that nature on a daily basis, I had Michigan slated to be a top 10 team. I had Michigan slated to be a team that I thought would be the top challenger to Purdue in the Big Ten. I did not foresee the fact that Michigan would be able to dominate the sport the way that it's dominating the sport. And I went through and looked at some numbers yesterday on just so far what Michigan is doing historically from a dominance perspective. Michigan so far this season against power conference opponents, and I'm including Gonzaga and San Diego State in that equation because obviously they're power conference caliber programs, even if they're not playing right now in a power conference. Both will be members of the Pac-12 next season. Michigan's average margin of victory, counting those two teams and all their power conference opponents, against power conference opponents, is 26.2 points per game. The Kentucky team that went 38-1 and lost to Wisconsin in the Final Four in 2015, that had the Harrisons, Tyler Ulis, Devin Booker, Willie Cauley-Stein, Karl Towns, Trey Lyles, all those players. That Kentucky team had an average margin of victory in 30 games against power conference opponents of 18.4 points per game. That is what Michigan is doing right now. And Michigan, which has been beautifully constructed by Dusty May, who's in his second season right now as the Wolverines head coach, has a path, in my opinion, where it is going to be winning games for a long time, and a long time convincingly. Now, what I'm curious to see is who is going to be the team that puts actual game pressure on the Wolverines. There were two games early in the season that Michigan was in a possession game. One against Wake Forest, Detroit. The other was at TCU on November the 14th. But since those two victories, nobody has come remotely close to Michigan in terms of putting any pressure on the Wolverines. And I think one of the things that makes it so hard when you're playing Michigan, and I talked to a coach about this week, is because of the lineup that Dusty May starts with Axel Lendeborg, with Merez Johnson, with Adai Mara in the middle. Michigan's positional size is beyond ridiculous starting the game at 3, 4, and 5. Michigan, again, in the Players Era Festival, was holding its opponents in those 3 games to just over 31% from the field. So because of the size, you can't really drive on Michigan. You can't really post them up. So you have to go over the top of its defense. It is going to take a team to make, I think, between 12 and 15 threes to have a chance to beat Michigan. So what I'm curious to see is, when are we going to see the Wolverines in a scenario where Michigan is sweating, where Michigan is in a tight situation? And I went through their upcoming schedule. Michigan this weekend will play at Maryland, a team that, again, has been banged up throughout the start of the season in its first season under Buzz Williams. That, to me, will be a blowout. This is what Michigan's schedule is after the Maryland game. LaSalle at home, McNeese at home, USC at home. Then Michigan goes on the road to Penn State, who could be the worst team in the Big Ten. Then a home game against Wisconsin, who lost by 30 at Pinnacle Bank Arena to Nebraska last night. We'll get more to Nebraska later in the show. Then Michigan goes to the Great Northwest, to Washington, and to Oregon, and then comes home to take on Indiana, Ohio State, and Nebraska. That's the 11-game stretch for Michigan. And based what I've seen so far on the competition that Michigan is going to face during that stretch, I don't see how any of those teams, especially the teams that are going to have to go to Ann Arbor, are going to be able to be within single digits of the Wolverines. So if Michigan were to run the table, if Michigan were to be in a situation where it was to win these next 11 games, the Wolverines would then take a 20-0 record into its game against Michigan State on January the 30th. I know this is way, way in advance, but it's something to think about. And you have to look ahead in college basketball in terms of predicting a path when you're tracking regularly who is going to be potential number 1 seeds in the NCAA tournament. Because I talked about this a little bit on last Thursday's show, and I'm going to continue to talk about it. Every single game matters in college basketball. And there was a belief and a feeling, and for good reason, that the Big Ten was always going to run through Mackey Arena because of what Purdue brought back. Those tables got flipped last Saturday when Iowa State beat Purdue. Because now all of a sudden Michigan has an inside track, at least as of today, to be the number 1 seed in the Midwest region. That means Michigan would go through Chicago to get to the Final Four in Indianapolis, and Purdue would have to go elsewhere. Remember, the United Center in Chicago, where the Sweet 16 and the Elite 8 games are going to be played this year in the Midwest region, only 124 miles from Mackey Arena. But you know as well as I do, this is only December. The balance offensively for Michigan is incredible. It's hard, in my opinion, to get a gauge yet on which players are truly, truly shining and not shining and standing out, because so many of the minutes in these games have been garbage time. But I'm curious to see who is going to be able to put game pressure on Michigan when you look and dissect the schedule. And there's so many different layers to being a successful head coach in this climate. You have to be a good recruiter. You have to be a good coach. You have to be a great evaluator, because you're putting together teams, obviously, every single year. But you also have to be somebody, again, who can build elite roster composition. And I've said it before and I'll say it again, Dusty May is as good a roster composer as we have in the sport right now. Michigan 2 years ago in its final season under Juwan Howard was 8-24. Dusty May comes in from Florida Atlantic, gets Danny Wolf from Yale, gets Vlad Golden from Florida Atlantic, who played for him on that Final Four team in 2023, gets Trey Donaldson. And all of a sudden, Michigan wins the Big Ten tournament and is in the Sweet 16 playing Auburn for the right to go to the Elite Eight. So then all of a sudden, Trey Donaldson goes to Miami. All of a sudden, you lose Danny Wolf and Vlad Golden. Dusty May brings in Merez Johnson, Axel Lendeborg, Adai Mara, Elliot Cadeau, and you have Michigan right now doing historical things, and is a team that is positioned. Now, things can obviously change daily in college basketball, but Michigan is a team that's positioned to continue to rip through its schedule in January like a chainsaw through butter, and could take a 20-0 record into that game against Michigan State on January 30th. It has been beyond impressive to see what the Wolverines are doing. And again, Michigan next up will play Maryland in College Park. That's one of our three big things. But you know as well as I do, there is always more meat on the bone when it comes to this show. Jon Rothstein here on Inside College Basketball Now.
When you need your sports news all the time,
we've got breaking news to bring to you.
CBS Sports HQ gives you a snapshot of all the sports that matter to you. When you need your sports in a snap, find it on CBS Sports HQ. Streaming free anywhere you are.
All right, Jon Rothstein back here on Inside College Basketball Now. I want to remind you to subscribe to Inside College Basketball Now on both Apple and Spotify. We want to be your Bible for the college basketball season and beyond. We are the only college basketball podcast coming to you 52 weeks out of the calendar year. Also want you to like and subscribe to the show on YouTube. We want to get up to 250 likes on this particular show. And also send me your questions in the chat. I will get to them later in the show because this show is about you, the college basketball fan, and we need an army with us each and every time we do a show for Inside College Basketball Now. And a reminder, every Monday and Thursday during the 25-26 college basketball season, we'll be doing a live show at 1 o'clock Eastern. And if you can't catch those shows live, tune in on your commute home, tune in during your morning workout on Apple and Spotify. And also remember, there will be exclusive additional shows throughout the course of each week with some of the biggest and best names in the sport who we're doing interviews with. So our second big thing today is that the Big East is at an early crossroads and should take a hard look at Notre Dame. Now, before I get into Notre Dame, I want to get into the first part of that equation. More and more now in college sports, you are hearing things talked about, and you are hearing the term Power Four. You were hearing about the haves and the have-nots. And more in college basketball, we are seeing a line of demarcation from the ACC, the Big 12, the Big East, and the SEC, the Big 10 and the SEC. The Big East is on the outside of that. So if the ACC, Big 12, Big 10, and SEC are all on the outside of obviously everything else and on the inside of their own little stratosphere, that, to me, is a red alert for the Big East. And the results on the floor this season so far have reflected that. Now, each and every Friday, I do a projected bracket for the upcoming NCAA tournament. And I was working on it last night and this morning because I'm going to post it tomorrow. And as of right now, there are 3 Big East teams projected to be in the field. UConn, who obviously is one of the best teams in the country, again, under Dan Hurley. St. John's under Rick Pitino. And Seton Hall under Shaheen Holloway, who's been a shining light in what has been a very disappointing start for the Big East as a whole. The Big East 2 years ago had 3 teams into the NCAA tournament: UConn, Marquette, and Creighton. All 3 were standout teams. All 3 wound up making the second weekend of the NCAA tournament. Last year, the Big East found a way to get 5 teams into the NCAA tournament: UConn, Marquette, Creighton, St. John's, and Xavier, who made the first 4 and beat Texas before losing in the round of 64 to Illinois. The Big East last season had no teams in the second weekend of the NCAA tournament. And the Big East right now is trending towards a situation where, unless some of their teams can move the needle between now and Christmas in non-conference play, and unless some of their teams can do enough in league play when they play St. John's and UConn, it is going to be extremely, extremely difficult for any teams other than UConn and St. John's to be at-large teams to the NCAA tournament. Now, those of us who grew up in the Northeast look at this and say, this feels unfathomable that the Big East is in this position. But this is the reality of the situation on December 11th, 2025. UConn and St. John's are a class above. Seton Hall has been, again, a great surprise under Shaheen Holloway after only winning 7 games last season. We'll see if it continued. But the other teams that obviously the Big East possesses that we looked at as potential NCAA tournament contenders have not yet lived up to the billing this season. Creighton, Marquette, Villanova, Providence, Butler, and Georgetown, as of today, are combined 5-17 against power conference opponents. That does not give you a very high ceiling for quality representation and quality volume in the NCAA tournament. Now, there's a few more opportunities for those teams to move the needle, but they're going to be very, very difficult. Villanova plays a game in Milwaukee against Wisconsin next week. It's a game that Villanova has to have if it wants to be an at-large team to the NCAA tournament, unless it's able to win multiple games against St. John's and UConn in Big East play. Marquette, a team that obviously has really struggled under Shaka Smart after losing Cam Jones, David Joplin, and Stevie Mitchell, has a game Saturday at Mackey Arena against Purdue. That is going to be like pushing a boulder up a hill for the young and inexperienced Golden Eagles. So what I'm getting at right here, is how can the Big East be proactive moving forward to ensure that moving forward, the Big East is in a better situation from a basketball perspective, that it can maintain its perch among the top conferences in college basketball. Because we've seen in realignment certain leagues be proactive and it pay off in a major, major way. And I know that these realignment moves are made with football in mind. But you're talking to somebody who hasn't watched a college football game probably start to finish in 20 years. Not since maybe Maurice Clarett in Ohio State won the national championship over Ken Dorsey in Miami. That's the first thing that comes to my head. But the Big East is a basketball-centric conference. The Big East doesn't have football. So the Big East needs to make sure it's protecting its greatest commodities while being proactive and not reactive. I look around the country right now, and I'm looking at this from a basketball perspective because this is Inside College Basketball now, and I'm a basketball reporter. Look at what some of the other leagues have done in terms of realignment. The Big Ten has added UCLA, Oregon, USC, and Washington. Major, major brands. I would be shocked, if the Big Ten doesn't get at least 2 of those 4 teams into the NCAA tournament, and it might get 3. The third I'm looking at right now is Washington, who I have projected in my bracket coming up on Friday, because the main losses this year for the Huskies have come when they weren't at full strength. Hannah Steinbeck was out of the lineup. Desmond Claude was out of the lineup. But that's a great job by the Big Ten of being proactive and not reactive. What about Brett Yormark in the Big 12? Adding the 4-corner school. Arizona, Arizona State, Colorado, and Utah. Arizona right now is the number 1 team in college basketball. Arizona State and Colorado look like potential bubble teams. That's proactive, not reactive. The SEC added Texas and Oklahoma. Both teams made the NCAA tournament last season. So now you start looking at things from the Big East perspective. And we'll see over the next couple of weeks and months if any of those teams that I mentioned are going to be good enough to win enough games over UConn and St. John's in Big East play to build at-large resumes for the NCAA tournament. But right now, you have to say it's an unlikely possibility based on what we've seen so far. And think right now at how fragile the 2 top-tier brands are in the Big East, UConn and St. John's. UConn's a program, again, that literally, by coming back to the Big East, it has pumped oxygen into the league. And I was at Madison Square Garden on Tuesday. I am still amazed, doing this 20 years, at the type of support and the type of fan buzz that UConn gets when it comes to MSG. Not many teams do the Garden like UConn, if any. But on top of that, UConn has been linked to potential realignment, most notably with the Big 12, more so than any other program in college basketball when you talk about potential expansion. UConn is out there. UConn has a team and a program that have won multiple national championships, and it also has a major media market. It's an attractive place for any one of those Power Four conferences to try and land to increase their basketball package when rights are going to come to the table. So even though UConn is still in the Big East, you never really feel safe with them. And then there's St. John's, coached by Rick Pitino, arguably one of the top 3 college basketball coaches of all time, along with John Wooden and Mike Krzyzewski. But Rick Pitino's 73 years old. Now, he could coach another 20 years, and nobody would be shocked. But with that said, he is 73 years old, and he also has resurrected a dormant and irrelevant program. And I don't think people understand how things had to align perfectly, and divine intervention stepped in for Rick Pitino to be St. John's head coach. Rick Pitino, because of the FBI scandal, was removed as Louisville's head coach in 2017. He then went to Greece to coach, okay, and then came back to be the head coach at Iona. What coincided with him becoming the head coach of Iona? Name, image, and likeness. It also coincided with St. John's being in a situation where it desperately had to make the right hire. Well, you have a Hall of Fame coach for a Queens school coaching in New Rochelle, New York. And at the same time, not only was name, image, and likeness coming in, but so was the transfer portal, and so was the support of a billion-dollar booster in Mike Rapoli. So you have a 73-year-old coach right now who is the primary reason why St. John's has been nationally relevant. St. John's administration should give Rick Pitino anything he wants for what he has done for that school, because divine intervention has put him in place as St. John's basketball coach. But he's also 73. And UConn is the program and the brand that in current expansion is most coveted by leagues like the Big 12 and the ACC. Now, I understand there's a lot of financial components that you have to look at when there's all these different things that come into play in terms of moves making sense. But here's one thing I know. The Big East can't be reactive moving forward. It has to be proactive. Now, I am not somebody who is going to sit here and act like I have working knowledge on any other sport, because I don't. I just told you the last college football game that I watched from start to finish was when Ohio State beat Miami and Maurice Clarett was the running back. But I do know this. I do see things come across my phone. I do stay up to date on certain things. I'm not going to follow the college football playoff. I'm not going to follow the NFL. But I did see earlier this week that Notre Dame was very upset that it was passed over for a spot in the college football playoff. And I did see a headline from the Notre Dame athletic director that Notre Dame felt like its relationship was strained with the ACC. If Notre Dame's relationship is strained with the ACC and Notre Dame football is an independent, if you are in the Big East office right now, the light bulb has to go on above your head and you have to say, game on. Notre Dame basketball flourished in the Big East when Mike Brey was the head coach. Notre Dame has natural rivalries built in the Big East Conference with UConn, with Villanova, with Georgetown, with St. John's. It is a seamless transition. Now, I did some recon and I made some phone calls, and there's going to be a lot of red tape when it comes to getting Notre Dame out of its obviously agreement with the ACC. But if you're the Big East, you have to at least explore that. That is the type of needle-moving acquisition that the Big East has to look at. Because if you don't do that, if you don't look to add something of significance like a Notre Dame or a program of that ilk, you are going to just be treading water until one of two things happen. Rick Pitino no longer coaches at St. John's, and that drastically changes the brand associated with that program, because the person who follows Rick Pitino at St. John's is going to have an unbelievably hard job. And then you have to hope that one of the other Power Four conferences does not poach UConn. There's been so many different schools that have been thrown out in regards to potential realignment with the Big East. Rick Pitino tweeted a couple of weeks ago about Dayton belonging in the league. Xavier, who is coached by Richard Pitino, would never allow that. Would never allow Dayton to be a member of the Big East. So you start looking elsewhere. I think you start in South Bend, Indiana, if you're Val Ackerman, because there have been such an issue for realignment with so many schools because so many schools play football. Notre Dame's football is in a different stratosphere because it's an independent. And that, to me, is a golden opportunity for the Big East office to set up camp in South Bend, Indiana, and say, what's it going to take? Notre Dame, a great place to start. You want to tell that you're going to re-explore other programs who are basketball-centric, who have a great following? I would take a hard look at VCU. VCU, I was texting with somebody who was at the VCU New Mexico game last night. He couldn't believe what it was like to go to a game at the Siegel Center. Couldn't believe it. And that's a program, again, that if you added a program like Notre Dame, you're starting to put air back in your tires. Memphis, of other non-power conference programs that would give you gravitas, could be another target. We've heard Memphis linked to the Big East sporadically over the last couple of years. Memphis plays football. That's an issue. You don't have that issue with Notre Dame. You don't have that issue with Notre Dame. That's where I would start if I was Val Ackerman and the Big East office. And then I would look after that. But considering the fact that and there's going to be red tape with any acquisition, but you have to at least do the legwork. You have to at least start digging and say, what's it going to take? Because the way things are currently constructed right now, if you're saying, John, on December 11th, if you had to put poker chips in the middle of the table, how many teams from the Big East are getting in the NCAA tournament? I would say 2. UConn and St. John's. And how many teams are going to be in the NCAA tournament from the other power conference leagues, the other Power 4 leagues? I think in my projection for Friday, I'm going to break out the fine-tooth comb here, in a couple hours when I get off the air. The SEC, probably about 8 right now. The ACC, 7 or 8. And then double digits out of the Big 10 and the Big 12. That means the other conferences that are perceived to be power conferences in basketball are getting 4 or potentially 5 times the amount of teams projected wise that the Big East has in line to be in the NCAA tournament in 2026. Now, the Big East has one of the best teams in the country in UConn. The Big East has a team that can win its 3rd national title in the last 4 years in UConn, and a coach in Dan Hurley who is on the verge of being mentioned with the best to ever do it. And the other team in the Big East, coached by Rick Pitino, has a team, in my opinion, that's going to win a lot of games in the Big East. St. John's has been a bit disjointed to start the season, but St. John's, much like last year, even though St. John's has no major non-conference win so far, except for Baylor in Las Vegas, St. John's to me, and Ole Miss at the Garden, St. John's to me is a team that will get progressively better as the season goes along. But the Big East as a conference right now is at an early crossroads, and there's going to be a couple more opportunities for teams in this league to make statements and move the needle to get more teams into the NCAA tournament coming up on Selection Sunday. But beyond that, the league has to do something. Beyond that, the league has to be proactive and not reactive. And again, I'm not acting like I know anything that's going on with college football, but that headline caught my eye. It caught my eye big time. And if you're the Big East, the recon starts in South Bend, Indiana, to, again, be proactive, not reactive. One program that has been extremely proactive has been Nebraska, and Nebraska is 10-0 after Wednesday night's 90-60 win over Wisconsin at Pinnacle Bank Arena. Nebraska under Fred Hoiberg has taken some time to get going, but Nebraska now, to me, is one of the best stories that we have so far coming out of the Big Ten during the 25-26 season. And it's really interesting to me because Fred Hoiberg, when he became the head coach at Iowa State, was known and was synonymous with open floor basketball with great shooting, great spacing, and extremely skilled offensive players. And that's a major reason why Fred Hoiberg was able to have the success that he had at Iowa State, which then allowed him to become the head coach of the Chicago Bulls. What he's doing at Nebraska right now and the way he's turned this program around is the complete opposite of the formula that he used to make Iowa State nationally relevant and then become the head coach of the Chicago Bulls. A couple of years ago, Nebraska had a really, really tough season, and Fred Hoiberg recalibrated his plan from playing an open style with shooting and spacing and cutting. And now he is in a scenario where he is a defensive-minded coach who preaches physicality and toughness. And look, Nebraska, a couple of years ago, finished 500. Then 2 years ago, Nebraska made the NCAA tournament, lost a tough first-round game in Memphis to Texas A&M. And last year, Nebraska was 17-9 on February 16th and was in position to return to the NCAA tournament for the second year in a row, but lost 5 straight games down the stretch. Didn't only miss the NCAA tournament, but missed the Big Ten tournament because then, if you remember, only 15 of the 18 teams qualified for the Big Ten tournament, went on to win the crown. But what we're seeing now, to me, is a two-sided team. And what I mean by that is Nebraska was elite on offense against Wisconsin, and Nebraska is also doing a tremendous job defensively. In the last 2 games, Nebraska has held Creighton and Wisconsin to a combined 110 points, an average of 55 points if you're keeping score at home. Getting Rink Mass back up front, a face-up 5 who missed last season due to an injury, has been a major, major key for Nebraska under Fred Hoiberg. Price Sanford from Iowa was a major add out of the transfer portal. And then there's guys like Berkey Buchtenschel, who was a part of the team last year, gives them size, gives them physicality up front. And then there's another player at point guard, Jamarcus Lawrence, who was at Nebraska 2 years ago, transferred to Rhode Island, and is transferred back to lead this team at point guard. This is a fun, aesthetically pleasing style who right now is 10-0. Nebraska's 10-0 entering Saturday's game against Illinois, who I think is a dark horse Final Four team. So Saturday's game at Illinois is going to be Nebraska's toughest game of the season. But if you're Fred Hoiberg, if you're Nebraska, you have a team right now that is unequivocally a top 25 team and a team that's building a resume. Nebraska has beaten New Mexico on a neutral court, who that win is looking better and better after New Mexico beats Santa Clara and VCU. Nebraska has beaten Kansas State and Kansas City. Nebraska also has beaten Creighton and beaten Wisconsin, who is going to win a lot of games again under Greg Gard in the Big Ten. So this is an emerging story for a program, if you remember, has never won an NCAA tournament game. And I was thinking last night about the energy that Pinnacle Bank Arena brings. And a couple of years ago, I was fortunate enough to go to Pinnacle Bank Arena and host Nebraska's Midnight Madness. And I could not believe, or it wasn't maybe midnight, it was an early season event. And I could not believe the energy that I felt at Pinnacle Bank Arena. And I'm watching the game last night, and I'm watching the cutting, and I'm watching the open space that Nebraska plays with in the half court, with Rink Mast obviously operating as a face-up 5. And I'm watching the way this team is sharing the ball and shooting the ball and being a team that, again, is embodying everything about balance, but also bringing the defensive side of the floor as well. And I'm thinking what it's going to be like this winter at Pinnacle Bank Arena. And I'm going to go on the record right now. If Nebraska makes the NCAA tournament in 2026 and wins an NCAA tournament game for the first time in school history, I, at some point before the start of the 26-27 season, am going to fly to Lincoln, Nebraska. I'm going to go downtown. I'm going to put my credit card down at a bar for an hour, and I am going to throw a happy hour for Nebraska basketball fans, because that's what's at stake right now. There is a window for this team not just to get to the NCAA tournament, but to win a game. Tim Miles got to the NCAA tournament, never won a game. Danny Nee did a great job at Nebraska, never won a game as Nebraska's head coach. Nebraska has never won a game in the NCAA tournament. And if they do, I will be buying the Peroni in Lincoln. And you better believe I'm going to be there. Looking forward to schmoozing with everybody and celebrating what is an underrated fan base in college basketball, because the program, again, has never advanced in March Madness. We will see if that changes in 2026, because you know as well as I do, this is only in December. Jon Rothstein here on Inside College Basketball Now. Send me your questions in the chat. We're also going to get to my annual Rothstein rankings, which we will do on a different topic each and every Thursday. This is Inside College Basketball Now.
The crowd loves champions.
Gladiator 2 is an epic spectacle.
To amuse you is my only wish.
The glory is yours, not mine.
Very good.
Gladiator 2, rated R, now streaming on Paramount+.
All right, Jon Rothstein back here on Inside College Basketball Now. I want to remind you to subscribe to Inside College Basketball Now on both Apple and Spotify. We want to be your Bible for your college basketball season and beyond. We are your only college basketball podcast coming to you 52 weeks out of the calendar year. Also want to remind you to like and subscribe to Inside College Basketball Now on YouTube. We want to get up to 250 likes on this show. That's what we're looking for. And again, a reminder, programming-wise, we are coming to you live every Monday and Thursday at 1 o'clock Eastern. So make us part of your routine. And if you can't get to watch the show live because you have an office meeting, you have a lunch, or something like that, catch us during your early morning workout or on your commute home on Apple or Spotify. And again, we need an army with us for every single one of these shows. Be all you can be. And now we want to get to something we've been doing every week. I'm going to pick a different category, and I'm going to give you my Rothstein rankings 5 through 1 moving forward about different topics throughout college basketball. And now for me today, it's 5 guards that need more attention. Number 5 from Arizona State is Mo Odom, averaging just over 17 points a game and just under 6 assists. Mo Odom had the big game against Texas in the Maui Invitational. He is somebody who has been the heartbeat of Arizona State's surprising start under Bobby Hurley. Sun Devils look like a good team right now in the Big 12. And number 4, I'm going to the ACC, and I'm going to SMU's Boopy Miller. Nobody is talking about Boopy Miller, but he's having a ridiculous season right now for SMU, averaging over 20 points a game. Boopy Miller could be an all-ACC first-team player at the end of the season. Number 3, a big guard from USC, Chad Baker-Mazara, was a starter last season on the Auburn team that made the Final Four under Bruce Pearl. He's transferred to USC. USC has lost a slew of players on the perimeter. Elijah Arenas, Rodney Rice, Amarian Dickerson. Baker-Mazara having a ridiculous season so far for the Trojans. Number 2, Duke Miles, a key cog for undefeated Vanderbilt. He's bounced around different schools in college basketball over the last couple of years. High Point, Oklahoma, but he's found a home under Mark Byington, averaging just under 18 points per game. And then number 1, Christian Anderson, a guy that really went off last Sunday against LSU in Fort Worth for Texas Tech. He is playing like, again, one of the best guards in college basketball, averaging about 19 points and 7 assists. Those are your Rothstein rankings for this week. Little cough, little water right here. Now, we want to hear from you in the live chat. So as always, this is Interaction. All right, let's go here while I get a swig of water with your questions. The chat is on fire. It's bleeding once again. Kalen Creedle 2924 says, John, Arizona doesn't pass the eye test the way Michigan is, hence why we're talking about them instead of Zona. Nothing Zona does make me think they'll actually contend for a chip. Yes, but you have to give Arizona credit for the games that it's won. Blowout win over Auburn aside, neutral court over UCLA, neutral court over Florida, winning at Gamble Pavilion even without Braylon Mullins and Taris Reed. Really impressive. That's why I have Arizona number 1. Let's see what else we got. Let's see what else we got right here. Michigan people want to talk about Hunter Dickinson. That's a couple years in the past. Let's see what else we got here. Cameron Pleasant 7570 says, John, are you more concerned about St. John's complete lack of defensive identity or Kentucky's lack of effort and seemingly lack of care when it comes to wanting to win games? I'm concerned about both. I talked recently about how the most alarming part about Kentucky and the way that it started, especially last Friday against Gonzaga, was its lack of effort. St. John's, to me, has a number of things that need to be worked out. The biggest, though, in addition to the defense, the rhythm, the chemistry, the role allocation on the perimeter. I know what I'm getting up front with St. John's, with Hopkins and Ejiofor. I don't know yet who is always going to be in the game on the perimeter for the Red Storm. St. John's, by the way, hosts Iona Saturday at Madison Square Garden. Let's see. Slamtana 502 says, John, hasn't Notre Dame already played in the Big East with Louisville, Cuse, Pitt? Their B-ball was better. No doubt about it. Now, Notre Dame did have some good moments in the ACC. Notre Dame won the ACC tournament 1 year under Mike Bray. That was also the same year where Notre Dame went to the Elite Eight of the NCAA tournament. Remember, Notre Dame went to the Elite Eight in back-to-back years out of the ACC in 15 and 16. Look, I'm just saying this. If you know there is a strained relationship between an athletic department and the league that it's in, and the league doesn't have football, and it's a brand like Notre Dame, and you have built-in games for rivalry purposes that are going to be great for TV, Marquette Notre Dame, St. John's Notre Dame, UConn Notre Dame, how are you not doing everything possible to see what's going on in South Bend, Indiana? And I know the Big East just did its television deal, but this would add a lot more, obviously, quality to that moving forward. The Pewter family says Joshua Jefferson is the best player in the country. He's just so unselfish in his points. Will never match the big names. I love Joshua Jefferson. I'm not ready to say he's the best player in the country, but I do think he is trending towards being a second or third team All-American right now, but this is only December. Let's see right now who we got. Nebraska fans are getting excited, it looks like. A lot of people want to talk about Fred Hoiberg. Nebraska is a senior-led team who knows what it's like to be in the NCAA tournament. They want to erase the previous failures. That's from SRed2229. Well, there's no doubt about that. And I did the game in Memphis where Texas A&M beat Nebraska handedly in 2023. It was the first go-around for a lot of those players going to the NCAA tournament. And look, Rink Mast, Jamarcus Lawrence were all a part of that team that lost to Texas A&M. It was the first time in the NCAA tournament. It'll be interesting to see if Fred Hoiberg can keep this going. And the big thing is this. If you're Nebraska, you have one, again, of the most underrated home court advantages in college basketball because Pinnacle Bank Arena is great. You have to be a dominant.
This is European soccer's biggest stage.
Written in the stars! What a difference she has made!
The question is, can you handle it?
The crowd here feels electric.
Stream every match of the UEFA Women's Champions League on Paramount+.
All right, welcome back to Inside College Basketball Now. Thanks to our great producer, Allison Cohen, for coming out of the bullpen helping with that. And what I say that the Nebraska has to be a dominant home court team. In the Big Ten, you are going to be facing teams almost every night that are going to be worthy of playing in the NCAA tournament. So this is what Nebraska has coming up. You're 10-0. You're at Illinois on Saturday, going to be the hardest game of the year for Nebraska so far. You're home to North Dakota, New Hampshire, Michigan State. And then after that, you're at Ohio State and at Indiana. So two of Nebraska's next four games are against Illinois and Michigan State, two teams I have ranked in the top 15 of the country. Now, we continue to wind down here. As always, let's get into some 3 good nuggets. Nugget number 1, don't sleep on Lubbock. Texas Tech could have 2 potential All-Americans this season. We know about JT Toppin, but I touched on this guy a couple of minutes ago. Christian Anderson, if Texas Tech can obviously regain the form it showed last year and earns a high seed in the NCAA tournament, Christian Anderson could also play his way into All-American status. Nugget number 2, rhythm in chemistry. I'm talking about St. John's. St. John's right now as a team only has 136 assists to 104 turnovers this season. The rhythm, the chemistry, the role allocation for Rick Pitino's team is still a major, major source of concern. Nugget number 3, a new dawn in Charlottesville. How about the up-tempo pace that Ryan Odom is bringing to Virginia? So far this season, Virginia is averaging 87.4 points per game under Ryan Odom, the highest that the Cavaliers ever averaged under Tony Bennett, 71.8 points per game. That's when the Cavaliers won the national title in 2019. All right, 3 games to watch. On Saturday, Arkansas takes on Texas Tech in Dallas. It's a major, major non-conference game for both. Also Saturday, Arizona, number 1 in the country, against Alabama in Birmingham. And a programming Saturday is going to be the game, but Friday morning at 8 a.m. Eastern, Alabama head coach Nate Oates will be my guest here on Inside College Basketball Now. Also Saturday night, Indiana is at Kentucky at Rupp Arena. Big game for both teams. Wildcats obviously trying to get on the board with a power conference win. And then 3 under-the-radar games. Thursday night, Hilton Coliseum, Iowa against Iowa State. First game for the Cyclones after that big win last Saturday against Purdue at Mackey Arena. Texas at UConn Friday night. That game's going to be in Hartford. Sean Miller can't stay away from the Hurley brothers. Played Bobby Hurley in Maui. He's going to play Dan Hurley on Friday night. And then late night, 11:30 Eastern, 8:30 Pacific on Saturday, UCLA plays Gonzaga. These 2 programs have had incredible games over the years. Want to again remind you to subscribe to Inside College Basketball Now on both Apple and Spotify. We want to be your Bible for the college basketball season and beyond. Once again, we are the only college basketball podcast coming to you 52 weeks out of the calendar year. And also want to remind you to like and subscribe on YouTube. We want to be your Bible each and every week throughout the calendar year, and we need an army with us for each and every episode. Be all you can be. Enjoy this episode. Enjoy your Thursday. And remember, Friday morning, 8 o'clock Eastern, Alabama's Nate Oates is the guest on Inside College Basketball Now. I'm Jon Rothstein. This is only December, but it's always a good time for Inside College Basketball Now.